Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar book review. This is going to be my full spoiler review for Avatar Legends Bending Academy Fire number 1, Light It Up. So I did my non-spoiler review a few days ago, so we'll talk more openly about the details in this one, but also do note that I will be doing chapter analysis videos on this book. Now it's only going to be a couple of videos because it's a pretty small piece of content ultimately, but that will be more where we go through the book sort of like scene by scene. So in this case I'm just going to be more broad overview, both with spoilers. So let's get into it. If you saw my non-spoiler review, you know I did enjoy the book. Didn't think it was like incredible, but I think there is a lot of potential here. I think my main positive would just be that this, as a bit of a different style of book, feels quite fresh in regards to Avatar publishing. And if they can get a regular release cadence going for this series, and we get maybe 2 or 3 of these a year, I think that's going to be pretty nice as just kind of like an extra series to have alongside the other stuff. But if this is kind of like one a year, it could get a little bit forgotten in the middle of other stuff, especially once the Avatar Studios animated stuff starts to come out. So I do think they need to kind of support this well. But yeah, it's a fun story involving these kids. The stakes are not crazy high, but it's still a fun bending tournament, and I think the potential of what this series could be as it goes forward into the national bending tournament and a worldwide bending tournament, I think has a decent amount of potential. We just need to know more about what the plan for this series is after maybe the first 2 or 3 books. But yeah, let's get into the details here. So, the book opens up with the introduction of our main character, Adaki. He's out fire fishing with his father. Fire fishing is where you hold a big kind of ball of fire out over the water. Fish get attracted to it and then jump up, and then that's when you catch them in the net. The big thing that we highlight immediately is Adaki kind of really looks up to his father, Adaro, because his father's able to make this giant fireball that attracts a bunch of fish to the point where they like pack the boat like immediately with fish, to the point where like, we might need a bigger boat. Adaki can't make a fireball that big, he can only make a small one, and he kind of messes up then kind of trying to make it bigger, but he is also attacked by a cat bat at the same time, which comes into play in the book a little bit later on. But for now, it just sets up the idea where he feels like he keeps messing up at the wrong moments. He feels like he's a little bit of a kind of weak link. He can't live up to the potential he maybe feels he should have. But he wants to be strong because his kind of dream is that he wants to be a strong firebender from this island, like the legendary team that won the nationwide bending competition 4 years ago, the Flamethrowers. He wants to be like them, and so this partly prompts the idea of why he's going to sign him and his friends up for the regional bending tournament kind of coming up and starting them on this journey. So that's the initial kind of setup moment. It's just like his father sees him kind of struggle with the fire bending, and it's just like, you have a little bit of a way to grow little matchstick. So this is a kind of theme in a way throughout the book, is that Adaki's kind of nickname is kind of Little Matchstick, but then you'll also see other characters throughout the book refer to the different members of Team Adaki as Matchstick in kind of derogatory fashion to a certain degree. But then, in a big thing, this is a spoiler for like the very end of the book, when they win the regional bending tournament, they change the team name. They finally settle on a proper team name. They change it to Team Matchsticks because they've fully taken that on board. That's what they are. It represents them as a team pretty perfectly. So there's a nice little arc with that kind of nickname and it becoming the team name. But after that, we do get introduced to the academy. It is the Sunray Academy. Sunray. Sunray Academy fits, makes sense, very fire-themed name. The island here that they're on is Karlok Island. That is K-A-R-R space L-O-K. So this is a new island we've not heard about before. They don't go into much detail about what the significance of this island is, where exactly it is, but it seems to at least be in a region where the regional tournament for this region seems to include Karlok Island and probably maybe a few surrounding islands as well, because it's not just teams from Sunray Academy attending the tournament, it is from other places as well. And yeah, we established straight away that the 4 characters on the cover are already friends. They already know each other already, but they are not a team. The idea that they're going to enter the tournament has not been discussed amongst them. It sort of just happens here in the opening sequence here, which is that there's a bit of a commotion at the school. There's a demonstration going on. It's a team of older kids fighting against some of the lower kids, but they're not like the absolute youngest, and the older kids win. And then one of the Sifus, Sifu Chuan, introduces the idea that, hey, we would like some of the people from the younger classes to sign up for the tournament. The bonus for this, the reason you might want to do this, is because, one, there is a 100 gold piece prize for the winning team, so that's 25 each for a team of 4. But also, any younger students participating in the tournament will get kind of direct training from me, Chuan. So she is established to be one of the people who trained some of the members of the Flamethrowers team who won the tournament previously. So Adaki jumps at this opportunity of like, this is how he can follow in their footsteps, and so he signs himself up and he just immediately volunteers the others. So Ji Young, Era, and Sujun. They all get just brought into play just through Adaki, and they're all a little bit kind of stunned and surprised, but eventually get on board because we sort of find out that, like, yeah, they'd all like to win that kind of money. They all have kind of dreams, kind of aspirations for the future. Of course, Adaki would like to give the money to his father to get a bigger boat/net. Ji Young, I don't think they ever cover what specifically she'd like to do with the money. With Era, she'd like to go on a vacation with her grandmother to the Earth Kingdom, so they can look at Earth Kingdom animals like badger moles. Sujun wants to get a cast iron wok so they can make a special recipe from this island, and also get special ingredients for it as well. So it kind of gives you a little bit of the theming for each of the characters kind of as you go through this kind of initial kind of segment here. And then the format of the book as you go through is effectively that we go through each of the 4 members of the team, and effectively they're each given like sort of like 2-3 chapters as their kind of like development section of the book. And this also coincides with the different kind of unique training methods that Chuan uses to help get them prepared for the tournament. And then, of course, the very last chapters of the book are the actual tournament. This first book does cover the entire regional bending tournament, where Team Adaki do end up winning. So the setup for book 2 seems to be that will be the nationwide bending tournament that they've now qualified for by winning the regional one. But that we'll get to that in just a second. So yeah, the first character who gets their development arc is Ji Young. And she is interesting because they kind of highlight that she gets very nervous under pressure. Even though she's actually quite competent, she is a good firebender, and she's actually quite intelligent when it comes to tests. She kind of falls apart in a way under the pressure of tests. Including this example where during the last math test, she started singing the Fire Nation national anthem and made a little bit of a fool of herself and just feels embarrassed about the whole thing. So she wants to kind of prove to herself that she can step up at sort of the right moments. The first training session that they go into doesn't go the way they kind of expected, because they're thinking it's all going to be like physical training. But when they get in there, it's all scrolls and ink brushes and stuff like that. And Chuan explains that what I'm going to do here is you guys have to get ready to draw what I call out. I'm going to call out a bunch of angles. You have to draw those angles as quick as possible. But also, as I go through this, you all have to kind of basically chant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over and over again. Keep that cadence going while also drawing out the angles. And they're all a bit like, okay, we'll try it, but we don't know what this has to do with firebending. And they all kind of fail in various different kind of ways, where they just kind of lose count, or it just doesn't go well. They don't get what they're trying to do. They're given an opportunity after this to kind of figure out like what was going on here, discuss amongst themselves. The conclusion they come to is just that like Why on earth are we doing math stuff about firebending? This is dumb. This annoys Ji Young, who actually likes math, and so she steps in to defend the whole process and actually explains the kind of concept of this in a way to the rest of them, which is that Chuan did give them the little teaser that this training is to honor Avatar Zito. So what did that have to do with Avatar Zito? And she explains that the reason math is important here and important to Zito is that Zito used math to a certain degree to help to save the Fire Nation. And so we go into this kind of little history lesson here. This is the most heavy the book goes into, kind of Zito kind of backstory, which is that the direct quote from the book, during the famine, Zito helped farmers like your late grandfather. She's talking to Adaki here. And then when she talks to, this is Sujun. Without Zito funding workers like Adaki's grandfather, you wouldn't have the flour for dumplings or bread or tons of other recipes, referring to Sujun's family's dumpling restaurant. And then to Era, she says, and your grandma grew up during the famine, right? So if Zito hadn't helped those farmers, she could have starved. So we're referring to this kind of thing. This is the thing in the Fire Nation that Zito is mainly known for, is resolving this kind of famine, or really helping quite a lot when this disaster happened to the Fire Nation. And so they cover it here. It also is the one point in the book where you get a sense for like whereabouts in the Zito era are we on a timeline perspective. And just especially that last line, and your grandma grew up during the famine and Zito kind of helped. So this happened when Era's grandmother was younger, is the idea. You grew up during the famine. Now, there's a little bit of kind of like, how long did the famine go on for before maybe Zito fully acted upon it or whatever? But it seems to imply, at the very least, that we're talking about multiple kind of generations of like families have happened in a way, and Zito's been the Avatar that whole time. So we're at least a good probably like maybe 50-ish years into Zito's era. So Zito should be old-ish at this point in time without being maybe ancient would be my guess. But we still have to wait and see. It's just a broad sense of where we are in the era. Cool reference. It's not really anything we maybe didn't know, but it's kind of recontextualized here with these younger characters talking about it here. And again, the idea of the math aspect here is just that, yeah, he did this through kind of like business administration, accounting, just using the numbers from within the kind of government position he had effectively to make this happen, specifically funding farmers in particular to kind of counter the idea that there's a famine happening is like, okay, it's kind of simple but like effective way to give a little bit of Zito backstory, which is cool. As for how this affects firebending, they kind of go into the details of like, the lesson was about kind of like keeping the regular breathing going. That was about like the counting while also doing the angles, because what you're meant to do is in firebending is like breath is very, very, very important, keeping that going. And then a key to firebending is the strong angles of the forms. Like when you do that fire punch, it needs to be like 90 degrees, that sort of thing. Ji Young at the start of all this did a breath of fire, and she had that 45-degree angle of like projecting it out, and that was kind of perfect. And this idea of like, yeah, strong angles for firebending really helps to get the forms and kind of technique down. And yeah, the learning from this is that they learn to improve their basics, like their basic fire punches and kicks, with the idea of kind of timing, breath, but also just keeping the angles on their kicks and punches correct. And it's like, okay, like that's what we're doing here. Simple, but like that's actually somewhat nice overall. An interesting little detail here is that they do actually say that like, harness your chi. And the book explains that like chi is your life energy specifically. It has that quote. I do like that because sometimes it feels like some material doesn't call it chi and then it just says it's energy. So I like that they actually kind of give that explanation here overall. The second character to kind of come into focus is Sujun, and they kind of, this is where they also properly introduce the main enemy team, which is Team Undefeated, which consists of Tehran, who's like the main villain, Miriko, Akito, and Botan. For the most part, Tehran is the only real character of these three. They kind of highlight that Miriko has a little bit of an edge to her, but the other two are a little bit just like, yeah, they need a team of four. They're not super important. But yeah, they come in, they start kind of bullying, kind of teasing a little bit, is specifically making fun of Sujun because they were at their family's dumpling restaurant, and they kind of witnessed like this idea of like Sujun being like almost like kicked out of the kitchen for making a mistake, and that gets brought up here. And so the idea is, wait, no, this is wrong. Like Sujun is a good chef. How dare you make fun of them for that? But this seems to be the truth of the situation, because in a similar way to the fact that Adaki messed up because a cat bat sort of like was near him, a cat bat was also there near the restaurant and made Sujun mess up a little bit. So the setup here is that the next training session is going to be using cooking to help train. They come up with this idea to sort of help Sujun out. So yeah, this is all about sort of fire heat control. You're just going to cook some dumplings, but the key is you're controlling the heat of like cooking this with your fire bending. Make sure you cook it evenly. Hot enough that it actually cooks, but not so hot that you burn it. That whole idea. And again, we continue this trend throughout the book of like Adaki feeling like he's a little bit of the weak link. At some of these kind of training moments, he's not really succeeding maybe super well, but he has some interesting ideas type thing. What happens here is there is a little bit of a kind of argument that kind of happens where he fails, but he notices that Sujun is going okay, like really well so far, and he says that, oh, yours is looking perfect, which surprisingly really upsets them. And it gets into this idea that like he didn't realize that they feel very self-conscious about their cooking, partly because of what happened in the past. They feel they have to be a perfect chef, not just good. And so, in a way, stuff being treated as it's perfect when it's maybe not perfect kind of hits home a little bit hard. So Adaki goes out to talk to Sujun, and they kind of connect over the idea that they kind of have similar arcs within the book of feeling that they're not quite good enough, that they should be a little bit better than where they're at. Slightly different angles on it, just because with Sujun it's more about like they feel like they have to be perfect, whereas with Adaki it's almost like he hasn't quite been able to live up to a potential in a way. He hasn't been able to prove himself just yet. But they get to this kind of moment of just realizing that like, hey, you don't have to be perfect to be part of our team, part of our group. We like hanging out with you kind of regardless. But we're going to work together as a team to kind of make this happen. So Sujun comes up with the idea of we'll do the cooking lesson together as a group, and together they cook one of the dumplings like perfectly. And it's like, okay, the team is coming together. They've got great teamwork now. There is a little kind of issue there going on. That's pretty cool. There's a reference to Quaiball in this, which is the game Azula and Co play on the beach. It's the kind of volleyball-esque game. Then there's a little bit of a discussion here, which is interesting. It's another Avatar Zito reference, probably the biggest teaser maybe for the future, which is they talk like, hey, if we win, like, what happens if we become national champions? Like, do you think as grand champions we'd get to meet Avatar Zito? They kind of don't really answer it because I guess they don't really know for sure, but they're like, hey, at the very least we'd have the money to be able to go to the capital and maybe meet him. But I think the setup there is that if they progress far enough into the tournament, they are highly likely to actually meet Avatar Zito. Zito is probably going to appear in this series at some stage. It just feels almost inevitable at this point in time. It's just, is it going to be at the finals for the national tournament, or is it going to be more of the worldwide tournament that we're maybe building towards? We're not really sure. But there's that. This then brings us into the Era arc. And her whole arc is interesting because it's partially about her experience with her kind of shorter arm and her firebending, but it also is about this animal companion that she has, which is the cat bat that's been a part of the plot up to now. This is her friend Buddy, but the initial attempt to introduce him to the rest of the group doesn't go well, because they all think when she says she's going to introduce her friend to them, they mean like a person. So when the cat bat shows up, they're all like, like wild animal attack, and they're like freaking out, and Era gets a little bit upset about this. She doesn't say anything to them initially. It comes out a little bit later on that this is the case, but as we go into the next training session, this is what needs to kind of come out, because there's a big plot thread that happens at this point in time, which is that the tournament is now going to happen a week earlier than planned, because Fire Lord Yosor's advisor, Kazumori, is going to be visiting, and they want the tournament to happen while he's there. So cool stuff there. We find out that, yes, even at this point in the Zito era, Fire Lord Yosor is the acting Fire Lord, which is what we know kind of from before. Kazumori is one of his advisors, and this is the main sort of like major official that's going to be at the tournament. But they have a week less to kind of prepare for the tournament, is sort of the idea here. This is where they get more into how do the matches actually work. And kind of like Earth Rumble, it's knock your opponent out of the arena with firebending, but also there is an alternate win condition, which is that there's a lantern hanging from the kind of the arena, from the top of the arena, and if you use firebending to cut the rope, you can, if you catch the lantern in the middle of the match and you hold on to it, you win as well. But if you the idea seems to be that you have to be careful, because you could risk lighting the lantern on fire, which I think just takes it out of the picture as a win condition. I don't think you lose if you destroy the lantern. They don't really go into that, but it's another win condition other than just fighting, basically. There's a cool quote from Zito that gets brought up here: balance the scale to create harmony. They kind of say this as like a bit of a mantra here, which I think is a perfectly fitting quote for Avatar Zito. So yeah, when it comes to what's the best technique to try and carefully take down the lantern, Adaki realizes that, hey, Era, the technique that you used to kind of quote unquote summon your friend, the ribbon of fire that you can create from your shorter arm, that is a really nice technique. We should all learn that so we can take down the lantern if required. And it's a clever idea because, as we'll get into here with Era's kind of backstory, it's like, yeah, she can't do the same firebending moves other people can do because of her shorter arm, but she's managed to gain a pretty nice amount of like fine control to make this kind of delicate flowing ribbon of fire that she actually has a lot of control over, and so everyone learning this is actually somewhat interesting. But we have to address the whole cat bat situation. So the teacher gets involved in this, Era comes back, and properly now everyone gets introduced to the cat bat buddy. There is still some concern. Sujun especially seems quite taken aback by not wanting to really interact with this animal. Everyone else eventually kind of gets over that, and that like, oh, we're sorry, like we didn't really know that when you said it was your friend that it was the animal you were talking about, but that's the whole situation there. And yeah, there's a bit of backstory here where like when she was younger, before she met the rest of the team, she didn't really have any friends. So Buddy, the cat bat, was her first friend who kind of came in to protect her from bullies at one point. She explains that like her grandmother was her firebending teacher initially, and she always struggled to learn firebending forms because most of them require like combos involving like both of your arms. And she couldn't do that, so her form was always off balance. She then focused on leg-based techniques, but also by herself did begin to train firebending with her shorter arm. And that's how she developed this ribbon of fire technique and began to realize that, oh, I can kind of like signal for a buddy to come over by doing like a figure 8 with my kind of smaller arm to kind of get the attention. But also it developed into this technique that actually she's able to generate somewhat powerful fire delicately, but that it also leaves a pretty long kind of trail of fire, and it can kind of be like an area of effect move almost. It's kind of interesting. She does begin to kind of teach everyone the secret to this when she gives a proper demonstration and almost like dances around kind of using it. It kind of gives everyone the secret to, that's how you actually use the technique properly. It is more of a fluid technique. You still have to put power into it because Adaki struggles initially with not putting enough power in, and he has to actually... That seems to be his big thing on a technical level in the book, is just he needs to concentrate when he firebends to make sure he actually puts enough energy into it so that it's actually powerful. But they all do begin to get it, and they soon have enough control to like cut down the lantern. There is a nice resolution to the whole Sujun is kind of like afraid of Buddy, where they step in to protect Buddy when Buddy nearly flies into one of the kind of fireballs that's flying around the place. So it's a cool little moment here where they kind of have a little bonding moment. Also, a little fun fact, the Sifu Chuan is allergic to cat bats, which is kind of interesting. But this then brings us to the end of the book, where we actually get the bending tournament. Now you'll note, Adaki hasn't quite had his character development moment. Yes, he had the moment with Sujun where maybe his issue kind of got brought up, but he's never kind of maybe resolved that going into this. It comes up in the middle of the tournament. This is where we get it. This is the 4th annual regional bending tournament, which is interesting because, of course, they say the flamethrowers won the national tournament like 4 years ago. So does that mean like it was the year before the first regional tournament, or are they trying to say it all happened that initial year? I'm not really sure. But yeah, this is where we get the first mention of the worldwide competition. Winners of the regional tournament will move on to the national and maybe even the worldwide competition. Now, they don't explain what the worldwide competition is, because it makes the regional and national ones make sense because it's all firebending, that you go from our group of islands to suddenly we'll be facing off against teams from the entire Fire Nation, including the capital. But worldwide is like, that would have to involve other bending academies from the other nations, from the other elements. So they haven't really broken down what the situation there. Does it involve all 4? What's the structure there? But in terms of what this series actually is, that's kind of an interesting idea in that, like, yeah, are we going to get Bending Academy Fire, Water, Earth, and Air, which eventually builds up to a crossover world tournament? Could be cool if they go that far, but we don't know. First match is Team Adaki versus Team Flicker. In a fun moment here, actually, Team Adaki is quite composed going into this match, and it's the opposing team that is nervous going into their first match, highlighting that the somewhat unique training the team did has actually made them super confident. So everyone except Adaki performs really well in this opening match. They're in complete control, they win the match, but Adaki gets knocked out in this match. They do highlight that it's a little bit of a random moment where someone kind of on the other team just panics and sort of like just literally like almost like rugby tackles him off the side of the arena. It's not even like firebending or like he messes up. He just kind of slightly loses concentration and allows himself to get kind of hit. So there's that. And afterwards, of course, the enemy team, Tehran and everyone comes over and is just like, you're the weak link of this team. We know it's you. And he runs off, and the team have to have their moment to sort of help him out, which they do. And it is a nice moment here, actually, because even Chuan kind of comes out to kind of praise him for how well he adapted to all the odd training they did. The rest of his teammates and friends kind of highlight that you're the entire reason the team has come together. We put so much effort in ourselves because we saw how much effort you were putting in, and we all appreciate that. And it's just like, hey, don't lose kind of confidence here. You're good. And they just give him that little boost kind of going into the next round, basically. It's a nice little moment. And he does get fired up after this, which is nice. Now, the one maybe criticism of the kind of structure of this book is just that we skip round 2 for our team because they get a bye for their next round because the other team gets food poisoning. That initially I thought, oh, did Tehran and his team do this? But no, they seem to just highlight that the academy put out like day old food or something like that. The headmaster says something like that, and it's just like, mistake I won't make again, because one of the teams is now sick. But either way, we skip straight to the final, which of course is Team Adaki versus Team Undefeated. So the two Sunray Academy teams are in the final, highlighting that there were actually teams from other academies, though they didn't really go into it overall. So the contrast here is that the older team is much more powerful, so our team goes on the defense. Adaki, they do highlight here early on, handles kind of Tehran in the middle of the arena on his own. They all kind of square off, kind of because it's 4-on-4. So he's facing off against the most powerful student in the Academy, Tehran, and is doing okay. He's struggling. He might not last kind of too long, but he's doing pretty well against such a powerful opponent. Tehran then uses his big move where he does this kind of charging, kind of swirling move. Adaki dodges, but his pants are kind of lit on fire, so he has to kind of roll on the ground to put it out. But as he charges through, he bumps into his teammate Moriko, and they just immediately burst into a giant argument. They fight, and Tehran knocks her out of the arena. And the other two teammates then are so shocked that this has just happened, the team has imploded, that they get knocked out by Ji-young and Era, who were the people facing them. So it's now 4-on-1 of Team Adaki versus Tehran, but it's still a challenge because of how powerful he is. So the team all uses the kind of ribbon of fire technique to sort of contain him, use numbers to their advantage, and they're gonna finish this by using the lantern win condition. So yeah, they use the ribbons to cut the rope, and then Adaki gets his big moment right at the end of the book, which is that he kind of charges at Tehran, kind of runs in a bit of a zigzag pattern while continuously firing off small balls of fire, kind of like you can see on the cover over there. And this just distracts Tehran in combination with the ribbons that are happening, the fact that it's 4-on-1. Adaki is able to get behind him, and then he basically climbs up his back, launches off his shoulders, and grabs the lantern from the air. So this wins them the match here. So yeah, Team Adaki win the regional tournament here. Nice moment where like all the kind of family members kind of come down. Adaki has his moment with his father, and it's like, hey, you can get a new boat now. But his father's like, no, this is your win. You won this. Like do this for yourself, basically. Maybe buy everyone dinner, but like it's your money type thing, which I think is a pretty nice moment overall. They then settle on the idea that, yes, our team name going forward, so we actually have a proper team name for the next tournament, is going to be Team Matchsticks. And the idea is, how is this team that's just won this tournament out of nowhere going to do, I guess, on the national stage, going up against people from other islands and I guess the capital as well. That's the kind of exciting setup for the next book, I would guess. I'm assuming it will be at least Fire number 2 and maybe 3. I can see how they might want to, on a bigger tournament, turn it into maybe at least 2 books and leave it there, and then maybe jump over to a different bending academy, but we don't really know what the full situation is. Again, they did tease that idea of the world bending tournament, but we don't know what they're doing exactly with that. But yeah, so Avatar Zito is not in the book in person, but the teaser is clearly there that if you progress far enough into the tournament, you're probably likely to meet him. As in, if one of the Fire Lord's advisors was attending a regional tournament, you can only imagine who's going to attend the finals of one of the actual tournaments as well. And the other thing as well is that I think there's potentially a little bit of setup potentially for the future of like the flamethrowers in terms of meeting these characters at some point in the future, because they were just kids a few years ago. So like they're not going to be too much older now, only 4 years on. Are they going to be in the tournament maybe as the older kids? That could be a cool way to do it, though, I'm not exactly sure what exact way that's going to work. But still, I think there is a lot of potential. There's a decent amount of setup for things. I think definitely what I would want going into sort of book 2 and 3 is just maybe more distinct character arcs for everyone. just spend a little bit more time on that. I think now that we're out of a lot of the introductory material, that should be possible. And I'm fascinated to see how the second book actually is in comparison to this first one here. But yeah, that's overall, I think, everything I'm going to do for my kind of spoiler kind of overview review for the book. Like I said, I'm going to do a couple of chapter analysis videos. I think it's probably going to be 3 chapters per video, so 5 videos to cover the whole book in as much detail as possible, and I will get to that over the coming days and weeks as we approach the end of the year. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on Bending Academy Light It Up. What moments did you like? What do you think is going to happen in the future of this series? Let me know. But otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.